do you have enough drive and passion to execute it? Because obviously ideas and ideation and coming up and brainstorming with ideas is great, and it means that you have that creative side. But in terms of practicality, can you execute it? Will you be able to, and will you stick to it?
Hi everyone, welcome back to the Sparkbuddies Podcast. I'm your host, Esther. Today, I will be speaking with Anika, who will share her entrepreneurial journey with us. We actually met during an entrepreneurship program this summer called LaunchX. So Anika, could you please tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, hey guys, my name is Anika Shinde. I'm from Sydney, Australia. The reason I think I'm on this podcast is because of my other podcast, MYC Uncensored. And it pretty much aims to discuss and bring up like different ideas that are stigmatized or taboo to young girls. And recently I started a Women in STEM series to kind of inspire the next generation of females who are interested in the STEM fields and usually feel disheartened because they don't see other females within the STEM field. But yeah, we met at LaunchX. I think it was a very different experience, especially because in Australia, you're kind of not connected to the rest of the world. So when I went to LaunchX and met Esther and everyone, it was a very different experience and kind of broke a lot of my expectations, obviously in a good way. In terms of entrepreneurship, I think a big thing, and especially the fact that I applied to LaunchX had a big factor, is the kind of culture around that field, and the fact that you're not really confined to a 9 to 5. You're not confined to having a boss and stuff. And I think a big thing is being able to create something of your own to help others. Obviously, not all startups have to do that, but that's something I'm particularly passionate about. And I think going to LaunchX was the location of LaunchX being in San Francisco, Silicon Valley, was a big factor for me because I got to see what the culture was like and the people around that area. And I think it was definitely something that exceeded my expectations. And I really think being an entrepreneur, having that experience in LaunchX of what it is to be one was very, very valuable.
I agree about LaunchX too, that it also enabled us to meet really incredible people like you and other entrepreneurs. So I just want to go a little bit more into what your podcast is about and what inspired you to start it.
Okay, so as I said, MYC pretty much aims to talk about stigmatized issues. So a couple of the topics I've covered and we've just covered as a whole are how to cultivate self-discipline, what it's like being a woman of color in today's society, what it's like being a woman in today's society. There are different ones as well. A lot of the time, we have like serious topics being discussed, like how do I tell my parents that I'm a part of the LGBTQ community, or how do I deal with an eating disorder and stuff, because these type of topics aren't something that you can just search up or something that you can chat GPT. And I think that's why it's so important, because we're not trying to target big issues like climate change or global warming, which is definitely like inspirational when people do it, but it's more reasonable to aim for a goal that is achievable rather than, especially because a lot of the podcasters are young females. I think the podcast tries to mitigate a topic that is so common but is so commonly forgotten about. But yeah, the podcast originated in 2022, so almost 3 years now. We started with around 5 podcasters, myself and another another co-founder. Both of us started it, and we had 3 other podcasters, and we kind of started with the podcast. It was, I think, a big thing as well when you're doing something like this is you have to be passionate about it, because if you're not passionate, it's really hard to see results. And even if you are seeing results, it's not something that you can just do in a month. It takes a lot of time. So I'm really glad that I started it really early, especially when I had like a lot of time on my hands. Obviously, I still put in time and effort into it, but it's just nicer when you can kind of build it up. Right now, we have around 30 podcasters. So we've kind of built it up quite a bit. And I think a really cool thing about the podcast itself is it's not something that requires that much expertise. It's about talking about your own experiences. And I think the fact that we've been able to grow our podcasting group, we're able to reach a greater amount of girls and a greater audience because they can talk about their different experiences, obviously. But I think a big thing in terms of how it originated was we kind of just brainstormed ideas on what's something that we could kind of bring to the community that hasn't happened already, and I think not many people have discussed ideas and topics like that. But it's something that's so common, and as I said, people commonly just forget about. So right now we have expanded to roughly 4,800 listeners across 63 countries, which is really nice to see the statistics and know that we're reaching and impacting females' lives. And of course, I'll go on to like my Women in STEM series. So originally, I started just talking about like women in STEM in like in history, but I felt like for girls to really connect and understand that there are females in the field right now, I had to reach out to actual females within STEM. So I pretty much did that through LinkedIn and kind of spoke to other females who would be interested. And so far I have like 8 to 9 episodes with females from STEM, and I've started to roll on more. But yeah, that pretty much aims to inspire the next generation of girls because I think a big thing for me as well, like a kind of anecdote to it was I was in my school is very like academic. Like it's not like girls or males are like not interested in pursuing harder subjects. But when it came to like choosing a minor like for 1 year, like an elective, um the engineering class I was a part of it only had 4 girls and 26 guys. And then the textiles class had 29 girls and 1 guy. So it's like it's like the disparity between STEM fields and STEM subjects compared to kind of domesticated subjects is still there and it's still inherent. Um, so that's pretty much what my series tries to mitigate because it's still something that still happens. And even if we want to say we're in the 21st century or like, oh, we're promoting females in STEM, it's kind of hard when you're one of 4 girls in a class of 30 and the rest are guys, even though they don't, they're not unwelcoming you, but it's hard to feel welcomed within that environment.
Yeah, I definitely connect a lot to that podcast, especially going to an all-girls school. I feel like it's really beautiful what you do. So, overall, it's a podcast to help motivate women, but also give them tips on more difficult topics, especially to speak up for themselves. And to give your tips to your audience, do you do research? How do you get all that advice?
I think the advice comes from this like experiences. So basically we formulate or we send out forms to the community about what topics they want to hear about or like what questions they would have. And based on that, we ask the podcasters if they're able to speak on that topic, and I guess it just comes with expertise. Like I wouldn't be able to talk about a topic such as like how do I tell my parents I'm part of the LGBTQ community because that's not something that I resonate with or have experience with. But we have podcasters who have experience with that, so they kind of just delve into how what their experience was, and obviously everyone's experience is different. But I think in times of like loneliness or when you feel alone, it's really nice to have someone else speaking about a similar experience so you kind of get their perspective. With me, I've spoken about cultivating self-discipline, being a woman of color in today's society. So I spoke from my own experiences, and the advice I gave was what I learned from those experiences, but we never try to push our values onto our audience. It's more of just giving them the ideal or the hope that there is someone else dealing with similar situations.
And you mentioned how there are multiple podcasters and their experiences. How did you get that many podcasters come on, and do you rotate throughout each episode?
Yeah, so we post sometimes like look, with our podcast it's kind of like we try to post as much as possible, minimum 1 podcast a week, but sometimes it's slower, so we might do once every 2 weeks, or sometimes it's really like a lot of podcasters want to come in, so it's 2 times a week. So there's not really any set roster, but with getting the podcasters on the podcast, we kind of I created a Google form and we kind of sent it out to the community about like just answering some application questions, like very basic ones. And then they come into the center, and my other co-founder, she kind of works at the center, and she kind of takes the interviews and stuff face to face. And basically we just see if they have like similar vibes. It's not very hard application process, but we do expect them to be able to talk about a topic and kind of be open to meeting and dealing with new people. And a lot of the times, because I co-founded it, I've done a couple of like podcasts with other podcasters who've just come in and aren't really sure what to do. And I guess you just got to be able to connect with people and speak to people, even if you're meeting them for the first time, and kind of be able to have that chemistry. So that's basically what we're looking for. With the 30 podcasters, I would say it's not easy to grow to that much in a short period of time, especially because the podcast is a very much volunteering opportunity for many of them. So we can't expect them to always be on it. And it's very much a whatever you can do, just do as much as you can. If you can't do it, that's okay. But yeah, we started with 5, grew to 30. With the process, we kind of just look for people who would really give to the podcast and be able to speak about different topics. But we also try to look for diversity and a wide range of podcasters so that we can talk about more topics. So yeah, that's how we pretty much got that many podcasters.
Is your podcast physical, like face to face, and is everybody in your school, or is it multiple people across Australia?
So the podcast isn't like anyone in my school. I'm the only one in my school who started it, but it pretty much ranges. Like we have podcasters all the way from like 12ish all the way up to 25. So it's not just for schoolgirls, it's for all females in general, especially through those years. I think are very important for development as a female and kind of shapes who you are and the values you uphold. So that's pretty much why we decided the podcast would be around for that age group. The thing is, we give up podcasters the opportunity so they can either record a podcast themselves and send the voice recording to us, and then we just edit and upload, because we just use a website to upload it. But it's like we have a physical center and we have a proper podcast set up with microphones and everything. So if people wanted to come in and do one with 2 people or like with 2 podcasters, or they actually wanted to come in and just record the podcast, and have that feel of actually being in a recording studio, we have that as well. I usually record the podcasts face to face, but with my Women in STEM series, I usually do what you're doing. I do like a meeting and I just send the Zoom link, the Zoom recording up to the person who uploads the podcasts.
Okay, that's amazing. So first of all, where can we listen to your podcast?
So we're on Spotify. If you just search up MYC Uncensored, so like MYC capital space Uncensored. We're also on Instagram at MYC_Uncensored. We're on Podbean. I think we're on iTunes as well. But I think the most easily accessible is Spotify.
How did you manage to get on Spotify?
To be honest, that's a really good question. I didn't really handle like too much of like the setup of getting the podcast out, but I do know that. So we kind of established our podcast on a website called Podbean. And on that website, that's pretty much where we get all our statistics and everything, and that's where we upload our podcasts. And pretty much from the Podbean website, it kind of asks you where else do you want to be able to, like, do you want listeners to be able to access your podcast? And we pretty much just like clicked whatever we wanted it to, and then we kind of established the account. In terms of the actual Spotify account setup, it was my other co-founder who was kind of in charge of that. But yeah, I think that's how we did it. We kind of went through Podbean.
Okay, and typically how long is a podcast? Like an episode?
Yeah, so that's a good question. It can kind of range a lot. I've had podcasts that are 1 hour. I usually do podcasts that are roughly 20 to 30 minutes for my Women in STEM series. Sometimes I'm speaking about a topic and like I'm just talking. And when I like upload the podcast, I'm like, oh, it's only going to be 10 minutes. And then I look and it's like 40 minutes or it's like 25 minutes. It's always exceeding my expectations. With the Women in STEM, I would say 20 to 30 minutes. And then with the more topics that are stigmatized or taboo, I'd say if I'm speaking myself, it'll be 15 minutes. If I'm speaking with someone else, it might be 30 to 40. But sometimes we split it up as well. Like, obviously we know that like with this new generation and like 10-second like brain span, we kind of split it up into 2 parts. If it's more than 40 minutes, we'll try keep podcasts to roughly 20 minutes or less.
Okay. And by speaking to other people, is it other podcasters, or do you
Other
sometimes invite,
podcasters, yeah.
professionals and onto your
With
podcast?
the Women in STEM series, that one's just on Zoom, so we can't really cut out anything. I'd want to keep everything in. But yeah, if it's with other podcasters, we'll either cut down or we'll do it in different parts.
Okay. And sorry, I'm just looking over 'cause my questions
No,
again.
all good.
What were the first steps you took to turn your idea into a product?
That's a good question. I mean, I guess we sat down, as I said, and we brainstormed like what we could do. I mean, we kind of have like the center is kind of a youth center, so a lot of things within the council, if they have any extra things or we get grants or something, they kind of give it to the center. So I think we had a couple of materials. And actually, with Australia, I would say a really good thing about it is they're very much inclusive and they're very open to giving people who don't have the opportunities. So we actually applied for this. I wouldn't say it's an award, but it's more of a grant, and we kind of explained what our idea was and everything, and I think it was like a $5,000 grant. And we kind of explained that, oh, we want to start this podcast at the youth center, um bring in young girls from the community to speak. We want to talk about topics that are taboo or stigmatized because nothing like that really exists right now. And we actually got the grant, and I think it was roughly $5,000, and we were able to buy materials and everything, like the microphones, the MacBook, the recordings. We were able to get the soundproofing in the recording studio and everything, and that's pretty much how we kind of enabled it to start. In terms of like actual ideation, I guess that came from us. In terms of finances, especially because it's a youth center, they don't really get money. We're just very lucky that we got the grant. And then pretty much just allocating the funds correctly so that we would be able to start the podcast as best as possible.
Do you know the specific name or remember the specific name of the grant or the company that gave you the grant?
I actually don't, but I do know that it was offered by the Australian government, so it wasn't like a private entity or anything.
Okay, that's really nice. What tools were most helpful in starting your business? You talked a little bit about where you publish your podcast, but are there any other recording tools, anything?
I mean, yeah, of course. I think in terms of like a company, the tools will always differ depending on what the company is. With the podcast, I would say obviously the recording material, and the setup with the MacBook and everything. We have access to the different accounts. So Podbean's a really good one. Publishing on Spotify, iTunes, Apple Music is really good. But I think the main software we use is GarageBand. And pretty much that's where we record like our voice recording, then we upload it into files and then put it on the podcast. So I would say GarageBand is really good. The microphones that we use are really good because it kind of gives that professional feel. And obviously having access to Podbean has given us the ability to publish on different websites, and different softwares so that people like we have more people accessing it. If like so if Apple Music is easier for someone to access, we get more reach on that. But I would say our main one is Spotify.
Do you use any tools to edit? Do you edit on GarageBand?
Yeah, we edit on GarageBand. It's like we try not to edit too much because it's more of like we're not really it's not I wouldn't say it's really that professional. Like we don't really have an intro song or anything. We just try to get people to if they need to re-record or cut down, we always do that. But to be honest, it's more of a conversation two people are having, or more of a sometimes it might just be a brain dump. But we try to keep it engaging as possible. And if it starts to drone on, we'll probably edit and cut it out. But yeah, we just edit on GarageBand, nothing too specific.
This is great 'cause I'm getting a lot of tips and advice for Spark Buddies.
Awesome, awesome, that's good.
I want to know, how did you get up to those 4,000 listeners? How did you initially market your podcast?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So we started with obviously zero. And in the first year we got roughly 1.2K. That was kind of a surprise to us, to be honest. I was like, if we get a couple hundred, that's really cool. With a big tip, I think, with gaining followers or gaining listeners is just be consistent. Just be consistent. Like there are podcasts that I've recorded that have gotten 80 to 100 listeners in one go, and then I have some other podcasters who've recorded and they've only gotten 5 to 10 listens. And obviously there's a big disparity with that, but overall every single listen counts towards our whole listener count. And it is hard to stay consistent if you're not seeing results, but my biggest advice is to just stay consistent. If you said every Wednesday I'm going to upload a podcast every Wednesday. If you're the only person, I would say like once every 2 weeks, once every month. Just having that set regime is really important because without it, you're going to see very uneven growth, and sometimes you'll get a month where you get so much, and then sometimes you have a month where you don't get anything. If you see steady growth, it's a lot easier to continue with it and keep growing. In terms of marketing, we didn't really do that much. Like we had Insta, we have an Insta, and we kind of started to grow our follower count. We kind of started to do like, sorry, Q&As. So we put up a poll of like anybody who wants a Q&A or wants to ask questions, just ask on our Instagram, and then one of us will answer it. And I basically answered some of their questions, and we tried to gain gain follower from that. I wouldn't say it was too effective. Um I wouldn't say that we've marketed, like we've put marketing at the forefront. Sometimes I would say that it would be better. I think we would have grown faster, and we probably would have got to 4,800, 5,000 followers earlier, but I wouldn't say it would have been that much earlier. I think the biggest thing, as I said before, is just staying consistent. And after that 1.2K, like sometimes I'm not able to come to the center as often just because of like school picking up and everything. But every time I go, it jumps by 100, like by 300 to 500 followers. And each time it's really nice to see that growth. I think we started, our main listeners are Australia, then the US, then I think Canada or China. But we started to see more countries listening, even if it's one or two listeners from each country. We're gaining that audience from those countries. So that means we're kind of being able to cater. And I think also understanding what our topics are, and knowing that they're going to cater to a wide variety of people rather than just a couple of females is really important. And that's how you kind of get that growth as well.
Yeah, that's incredible. It's already a huge milestone. Is there any other milestones or achievements that you are most proud of?
Um, I think I would say when we initially started our monthly podcast and meetings, we had our first one, I think, in 2023, and we had roughly 15 podcasters come. And we just got to speak about like our experiences, different topics. We kind of got to speak about the topics that the podcast had spoken about. I really got to learn about different people's perspectives. I won't include their names, but I've met some females who've dealt with domestic violence, and they kind of shared their journey on how they struggled and how they got through it. Some of them shared their journey on like their eating disorders and kind of how they got through it, what kind of targeted it, how they really grew from that experience. And I think just listening to their experiences and understanding that like the world doesn't just this like I don't think like this, but the world doesn't just revolve around you, like you're able to kind of meet other females, and they have such different experiences from you, and you're all in this one area, this podcast meeting, you're all in the same area, but you guys all come from different backgrounds, come from different experiences, come from different places. So I think that was one of my proudest moments, just being able to meet and getting to know other people. I think at Launch X, I think the biggest thing for me as well was meeting the people. I think the people and the friends that I made were probably more valuable than the actual program. But yeah, I would say that is probably my second most proud moment.
Yeah, for launch checks, definitely the same. Um, and I love how you talked about meeting new people. Like you didn't just go in with the numbers and the
Mhm.
statistics, but also the fact that you got to meet new people. And it was kind of like a full circle moment seeing
Mhm.
everyone friend. And so how do you measure success beyond the numbers?
So I think a big thing, it's kind of hard when you're at a podcast because you're kind of sitting in one room and you're hoping your listeners are enjoying the podcast. So it's hard, and you can't really ask your listeners like, "Hey, are you enjoying the podcast?" right after they listen to it. Obviously, we put up Instagram polls and stuff about what topics they want to hear and if they're engaging with the podcast and stuff. But I think a big thing is just knowing that our podcasters who are recording are always passionate, are always excited to record. I think that's a really big measure of success. I mean, I wouldn't say numbers are um like the only way to manage success, but I mean it's a really good indicator. Like if we're recording podcasts consistently and we see a growth, even no matter how gradual it is, and we see that the number of countries that we're reaching is growing, that means we're going in the right direction, and I would say that's the best measure of success. But yeah, overall I would say it's seeing the podcasters really excited about the topics they're speaking about.
It's a really different point of view that you have. Instead of relying on the opinion of people of the audience, you rely on the podcasters and how you're handling this business, the podcast. And does your podcast make any income?
I mean, I wouldn't say we make that much income. I think we sometimes make revenue from how many listens we have, but I wouldn't say it's that much. It's probably like $2 or $3 a podcast. I think our main goal with it is just to reach as many people as we can. I don't think our goal was ever financial success, but obviously, as I said, we're a youth led. Wow, we're at a youth center. So we kind of get funding from the council, like whenever they have extra things. But yeah, our main focus isn't really the money that we make or anything. It's just getting as much community engagement as possible.
Even with those $2 to $3, where does the money come from? Do you have people subscribe or is it the platform?
I would say it's probably the listens or downloads we get for certain podcasts, or like overall when we get achievements and stuff on the Podbean website. Like when we get like 5,000 listeners or when we get to 1,000 listeners, they'll give us a little bit. But yeah, I wouldn't say it's too much. I think if we had any extra money, we would probably save it up and kind of keep it towards the equipment if we want to update our equipment. Recently we did update our microphones and studio setup, which was really nice. Sometimes as well, because we're attached to a youth center, it's more of a community space, so we kind of try to organize like fundraisers or different events as well. We did a bake sale recently for Women's Health Week. We didn't raise too much. Like our main goal isn't to raise that much money. It's mainly to kind of bring awareness to the community about different issues, not just women are facing, but we kind of do have a focus on women. So we raised roughly like $160 from a fundraiser, and we kind of put all that money towards buying and updating the equipment that we have. But yeah, that's pretty much where I would say we source our money from.
It's great to know. I didn't know about Podbean and how they could pay you for certain milestones. So I'm definitely going to
Mm-hmm.
look into that. Now that we've covered all of the positives and all of the great parts of your podcast, what were some of the biggest challenges that you faced and how did you overcome them?
I think I think a big struggle, especially when you are in a podcast, is you don't really see the impact immediately. You don't see your listeners listening to the podcast face to face. You can't see that impact happening. Um, and I think anything like any social media platform, podcast, YouTube account, Instagram account, growth is very slow and it's very gradual. So I think maintaining and keeping up with it, even though you're not seeing the results you want to see immediately, was a big struggle. And obviously keeping to it, because if you're passionate about it, it's not the hardest thing in the world to keep to, but it's sometimes hard to not feel disheartened when you kind of don't see that growth happening, especially when we're in some slumps. Like sometimes we just have podcasters being very busy or we're busy ourselves. And there's not really any big events happening for us to talk about. Or there are big events like Christmas, holidays and stuff. People just get really busy and we just get maybe 3 to 10 listeners a month, like for that month or for that week. So I think that's a big struggle. But if you're really passionate about what you're doing and you believe in the idea, I think you're always going to see results and you're always going to see it grow. I think my biggest advice is to start early. As early as you can start, the better. That's why I think I've been able to see so much growth, and I can confidently tell people the impact I've created. Whereas if I was in year nine and I started it, it'd be hard to explain that it's such a good idea because it's hard to show the impact. But obviously, it takes people time to kind of be able to explore and get and see that, oh, someone's doing this, let me listen to it. And then you kind of start building it up. So I think that's the biggest challenge, staying consistent even in times of low growth. But overall, I think it's always a rewarding experience to just see your numbers grow, even if it's by 10, even if it's by 100, even if it's by 1,000. Another big thing is kind of being able to talk to the podcasters, because it's a volunteer opportunity. It's kind of hard to stay on top of the podcasters. Like we're not trying to force them to do a episode every week just because we need it. It's more of a whatever you can do as you go. So that was kind of a bit of a struggle because It's not really a company or a business where people are getting paid 9 to 5 and they have to meet certain outcomes and stuff. It's more of a volunteer opportunity. But I would say most of our podcasters are really passionate. And when we do see podcasters are kind of trying to leave the podcast or don't feel as engaged, we start to take applications again because I know there's always females out there who are willing to talk and excited to talk about different topics.
Yeah, with Spark Buddies, it's the same where I'm really reliant on young entrepreneurs, so it's really hard to stay consistent.
Mhm.
But I hope that one day I'll find that consistency, even if it's just once a month or twice a month.
Okay.
And you've also mentioned a lot of advice and lessons that you've learned, but what's one big lesson that really helped you and that you learned?
In terms of entrepreneurship, I think, especially because the podcast is something that nobody asked me to do, I kind of sought out and was excited to do it myself, is, as I said before, you're the boss of yourself. So the amount of time and effort and discipline that you put into yourself and into your company or into your podcast is directly related to the results you see. But I think a big lesson I learned is if it's something you're passionate about and you see and you have long-term goals and you want it to continue, um, you kind of just have to put in the effort. Nobody can say, "Oh yeah, okay, you have to set aside time today to work on the podcast." It has to come from you and it has to be something that you are going to do yourself. So yeah, I think that was a big struggle as well. Putting aside the time, especially when I started my Women in STEM series, I kind of thought of the idea and I was like, yeah, this is such a cool idea. But then when it translates to actually executing it, it kind of took a while to start up because I wouldn't say I was that locked in starting it. But after I did, I think forcing myself, or not really forcing if you're passionate about it, but clearly setting aside time and having that to do list of, yeah, so today I want to get this done. I want to reach out to these females. I want to message these females because it's not hard if you're consistent and you keep track of what you're doing because it's kind of like you're growing and learning from the process and you're kind of experiencing the whole idea and the whole concept and the whole interview within the process and it's actually really exciting to me. But I think the hardest thing is just starting. You can't expect everyone to have that drive, and not everyone will. Like, not everyone is an entrepreneur. And I'm not saying that you have to, just because you're not an entrepreneur, you're not the best. But yeah, I would say it's a lot of self directed drive and passion. And that's pretty much what I've learned from this experience, I think.
And you talked about having long-term goals. So, as a senior, where do you see MYC Uncensored going? Are you going to hand it off to your team? How is this going to work?
I actually haven't thought about too much about if I wanted to hand over the podcast. I think MYC is something that I've never done for like any college applications or any external validation or anything. I did it purely for myself and because I was excited about the idea and excited about gaining that community engagement and kind of helping that next generation of girls who feel alone, especially within the STEM field, but just in general. Um, I think with the podcast, because we have so many podcasters, I have already been able to take not a backseat, but I don't have to be super on top of it because we have so many podcasters already. In terms of like the different stigmatized topics, I mean, I record one those type of podcasts whenever I can. I record them when I go to the center or when I have time because it's not something that I really need to do too much research in. It's more of a me speaking about my experiences. With the Women in STEM series, I think it's just like my baby, like I feel like it would be sad to part with it. But obviously I think it'd be really nice to hand it over to another female who's really passionate. I mean, I still have a year and a half before I would like move or kind of go away. But at the same time, with that specific series, it doesn't really matter where I'm recording the podcast because I usually do it on Zoom and I just send it in. So as of now, I don't really have any hopes for leaving the podcast or kind of handing my Women in STEM series to someone else. But that doesn't mean that I'm not open to someone or a young female who's equally as passionate as me about sharing that light. And if she wants to continue or they want to continue, or work alongside me, I'd be really happy for that. But as of now, I think the series is something that I'd continue by myself.
That's great. And I've also noticed there are a lot more women who are interested in STEM or in harder courses than before. So I think that you do have I guess, a good chance of falling on somebody who maybe who has the same passion as you.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, and so thank you so much for coming on and for sharing all of this advice. To wrap it all up, what is one piece of advice you would give to younger entrepreneurs who want to start their own podcast or their own business?
I think in general, from the lesson I learned before, is you really have to identify what it is you want to do, why you're doing what you want to do. Is it for the financial freedom? Is it because it looks good on college apps? Is it because you're really passionate about the idea? Is it because you want to work with new people? Is it because you want to create social impact? Then, after identifying why you're doing it, making sure that it's the right reasons, what will kind of make sure, or do you have enough drive and passion to execute it? Because obviously ideas and ideation and coming up and brainstorming with ideas is great, and it means that you have that creative side. But in terms of practicality, can you execute it? Will you be able to, and will you stick to it? Because it is a lot of time, and it is time consuming. So I think a big thing as well, making a pros and cons list about whether you can do it. Because if it's not something that you're not wholeheartedly within, um it's kind of going to be a waste of your time. And I would never discourage anyone from at least trying. I think it's better to try than to have never tried. And then once you know that you're able to commit, literally just commit. Have that discipline and have that hard work and stay consistent. And even if results are low, as long as you continue and you have that passion, I'm sure it will grow and I'm sure it will thrive. But yeah, just staying consistent and knowing that you can commit to whatever you're trying to achieve, I think is my one big advice.
So it's finding that why, and then whenever you're down, kind of thinking back about that why and staying passionate to it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on. I'll definitely take away from all the advice that you've given.
Mhm.
Um, yeah.
Thank you so much.